So those of you who have been able to join this room already, just in the chat window, let us know the city you're dialing in from. Great. I see the responses coming in. I see Sabah from Srinagar. I see Arush from Bombay, Amarjeet from Delhi, Swastik from Bangalore. I see Faiza from Karachi, Pakistan dialing in as well. Great. Welcome, Faiza. Rizwan from Lucknow, Rajkot. Okay, this is going too fast. A lot of people in here in this room. Great. Keep those responses coming in. It's always great for our panelists to see where the audience is coming from, what is the mix of the audience that we have in this room. So let those responses coming in. Let us know the city you're dialing in from. I'm just going to wait for 1 minute for everyone Zoom to connect. I'm going to start the introductions very shortly, but in the meanwhile, let us know the city you're dialing in from. Great. So quite a few people in various parts of the country, a lot of them from India, but I also see some people from rest of Asia as well. Anyone dialing in from Africa, Middle East, Europe, please do mention your city as well. I see Davis from Ghana. Welcome, Davis. Uh, Anyone else dialing in from some other country outside of India? Okay, I see some from Ghana, Senegal, Pakistan, Ghana. Okay, quite a few over here. Great. With that, we are close to the 150 mark. And with that, let me get started with the introductions. Good evening, everyone, to those of you who are in Asia, or good morning to those of you who are in the western part of the world. My name is Sanjay Dhingra. I'm a co-founder and the chief operating officer at Seed Global Education. Those of you who have not interacted with us in the past, we are a firm that specializes in such interactions. We are people who get you connection or introduced with top engineering schools in the United States, rest of the world, and host such seminars or such sessions where you can interact directly with key decision makers from these universities and institutions to get insights on their admission process, their criteria, and take an informed decision about about the programs where you want to go further for your higher studies. We also run a special scholarship fund. This fund is today worth over $1.9 million plus. So substantial amount of money available over there. Some of the institutions that we are interacting with have instituted special scholarships or committed special scholarships to that fund as well. And by attending today's session, you have become eligible to apply for any of the scholarships available in the Seed Scholarships Fund, which is worth over $1.9 million plus. To start with our panelists today, we have an eclectic panel. We have four amazing people whom we have interacted with in the past, and they have been brilliant in what they do. We have Liana Corvallis, who is the admissions director at NYU Standen School of Engineering. We have Mark Khan from Boston University's College of Applied Arts and Sciences. He's the director of marketing over there. We have Catherine Hugans, who is the associate director at GW Engineering, George Washington's engineering school based in Washington, D.C. And we have Megan Jameson from Columbia Engineering. She's an associate director as well over there. I'm going to allow each one of them to introduce their schools very shortly, do brief introductions for themselves as well. But before we get into that, what I want to do is understand our audience a little better. And for that, I'm going to run two poll questions in quick succession. The first poll question is live on your screens right now. So if you're able to see the poll question on your screen, the question is, which intake are you targeting for your MS program in the US? Today's panel is made up of four US sciences and engineering schools. These are MS engineering or MS sciences programs as such. So which program or which intake are you targeting? Are you targeting the 2024 intake, the fall 2024 intake? Are you targeting the 2025 intakes? It could be the spring or the fall intakes. Are you targeting 2026 or later? Great. Keep those responses coming in. To the audience, I also want to clarify this session is only about engineering and sciences, natural sciences programs as such. We are not going to cover by a lot of these schools. In fact, all of these schools also have universities, also have business schools. We are not going to be talking about their business schools or their business master's programs. We are only going to be talking about their engineering schools and their respective programs. So if any of you have dialed in thinking about business programs, then this is not the right session for you. We do similar sessions for business programs as well. You can come into some of those, but today's program is specifically focused towards engineering programs. Great. I do have around 160 responses out of 225 people in this room. 160 have already responded. So I'm going to end the poll now and share the results very quickly. Great. So around 68% of our audience today is targeting the 2024 intake. So the fall 2024 intake, which is the earliest intake possible for this year. 22% are targeting 2025, so next year's intakes, and then 10% are planning for the future. Great. This was our first poll question. Really important for us to know where you are in the application journey. With that, I'm going to go live with our second poll question as well, which is live on your screens right now. Those of you who are targeting the 2024 or 2025 intakes, which aspect of application creation terrifies you the most? What scares you the most? Is it the writing the SOP, writing your essays? Is it getting a good GRE score? While a lot of schools over here are GRE optional since COVID times or continue to be so for this intake. If you're still taking the GRE, is the GRE score that you're scared about? Is it getting the strong letters of recommendations as a challenge for you? Is it your UG CGPA? Is it your extracurriculars track record? Or is it funding your studies or something else? So, what aspect of your application or studying or pursuing your dreams to pursue your master's in the US scares you the most about making the application? I'm going to keep this poll open for a few seconds. Do respond. I'm going to quickly run through the chat in the meanwhile to see if there's any important comments that have come our way. But if not, the poll is live for another few seconds. So please do respond if you haven't yet. Great. I did see some of the responses about 2024 intake in the chat. Please do respond to the poll instead of posting that in the chat. Uh, Omar, I see your question about medical programs. None of these schools offer science, your medicine programs. These are all either sciences or engineering schools, but none in medicine as such. So this may not be the right program. Uh, we'll cover more of that as we get into Q&A. But with that, let me end the poll and share the responses as well. So what we see is that maximum 45% of you are scared about funding your studies. You're not scared about securing an admission. So I like that. I like that you're confident about your chances of getting an admit. So that's great. That shows confidence. But funding is a challenge area for you. We understand that. We realize that. That's why we have a special scholarships fund as well. I'm going to talk more about that during the session as well. And we are, of course, going to ask our panelists about funding options for their respective schools. But funding is a common challenge area for a lot of you, followed by writing the SOP. So how to write a strong SOP, stand out through the SOP and make a differentiated application. Then it's the UGC GPA, GRE score, letters of recommendations, extracurriculars, and so on and so forth. Great. So this, oh, sorry, I did not share the responses earlier, but they are in your screen right now. As I said, 45% talk spoke about funding, followed by SOP, UGC GPA, GRE, and so on and so forth. With that, let me segue into this session and invite our panelists to join us as well. What I'm going to do is we are, of course, going to ask them a lot of detailed questions. I have a list of questions as well, where we are going to talk about admission criteria, funding, and so on and so forth. So we'll cover all aspects that you mentioned as aspects that scare you. But first, let's start with introductions for them. I want to invite each one of them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their respective institutions. I'm sure you've already heard or you already know their institutions. These are stellar names in the education industry, but I still want them to tell you a few USPs about their respective institutions, and then we'll get into the following questions. So let me go in the alphabetical order. Mark, why don't you start with your introduction and an introduction for Boston University's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Kahn. I'm the Director of Master's Marketing and Enrollment at Boston University's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. BU is one of the older schools in the area. We're also one of the largest. We're one of the largest national research institutions in the US. I represent arts and sciences, which encompasses about 30 different master's programs. So our more popular ones are computer science, and included in that is artificial intelligence, computing and data as well. But we also offer economics, we offer Masters of Science in Statistical Practice, and many others. So I'm actually going to give you in the chat a list of all of our programs so that you can check that out. But in summary, we are very international. We are quite diverse. We have students coming from over 160 different countries. So you're going to get a very dynamic exposure to amazing faculty members and wonderful fellow students. That's us in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I know Megan has some challenges at her end. Everything good over there? Great. So I'm going to invite Megan from Columbia to introduce herself and her institution.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Jameson. I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions at Columbia Engineering. We are the Ivy League institution of New York City. We offer many MS, PhD and MS2 PhD track programs across our 9 departments with over 250 faculty members and 3,000 graduate students. We're also one of the oldest engineering schools in the country. We are the oldest institution of higher learning in the state of New York, and we are the 5th oldest in the country. But happy to be here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Megan. Next, let's go to GW Engineering. Kat, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine Huggins, and I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions and International Partnerships. GW was founded in 1821, and we are unique in that we are predominantly a graduate institution. So we have about 11,000 students sitting at the bachelor's, but 15,000 students sitting at the master's and PhD. We're located right in the heart of Washington, D.C., so we're about 4 blocks away from the White House, where President Biden lives. And GW Engineering specifically has 6 academic departments offering a number of different master's and PhD programs. So I'm going to share our link to our website as well, so you can take a look at those if you'd like. But I'm happy to be here and to answer all of your questions as we go on.
Great. Thanks, Kat. And lastly, let me invite Liana from NYU.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leanna Koalis. I am the Director of Marketing and Recruitment at the NYU Tandon School of Engineering. NYU is also a very well-known and well-renowned school in New York City. We really have a very high focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. We have a pretty wide range of programs. We have traditional programs such as civil, mechanical, electrical. We have a lot in the medical space, including biomed and biotech. And then we also have some business-related programs, such as our most highly ranked program, which is financial engineering, as well as industrial engineering and MOT. Of course, CS and cybersecurity. NYU is also the school in the US that accepts the most international students of any other university. So we have a very global and welcoming environment for all of our international students as well. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Liana. With that, I'm going to start off. So all of them have also posted links to their various programs in the chat window. So if you want to have a quick run through their programs, it's right there for you. With that, let's get started into the questions. And the very first question which I want to ask our panelists today is the evaluation criteria. So what do they look for in prospective applicants like yourself when they're evaluating their applications? So anyone who wants to do a run through, and then we'll get into specifics as well.
I can go ahead and take that one. So we take, and I think this is probably true for all of my peer institutions, we take a holistic approach to admissions. So we're really evaluating everything that you send us. We have pretty standard requirements, so we'll ask you for your transcripts. We are paying special attention as well to your program major and your prerequisite courses, especially. We'll ask you for an essay, personal statement, 3 letters of recommendation, although you are allowed to send up to 4. We'll also ask you for a video interview. We are looking closely at whether you have research experience, work experience. We're looking for publications, extracurricular activities. We're really looking at everything that you're sending us to get a full view of who you are as a student.
Perfect. Anything different that any of your institutions looks for?
The only thing I'll add is GREs can vary by program, by institution. Most of the programs at Boston University do require the GRE. The other thing to look at, although I think all of our schools do not require English testing, is English testing. If your education was in English in India or abroad, we will waive the English testing requirement, but it's important to know whether or not an institution requires those.
Yeah, I just have one thing to add as well, which is that this is the year. First of all, I agree with everything my colleagues have said, but this is the year of ChatGPT, and a lot of universities have tried to make their application process a little more personal. Not saying that you can't use AI to help, edit or construct your essay, but at least at NYU, we still, what is most important to us is to find out who you are as a person, as a candidate. And so we have changed our essay questions slightly to be more personal, to be able to try and really get to the heart of who you are as a candidate. And hopefully you can write something that can't be replicated by AI. And so that's really one thing that we've been focused on as well, is just trying to figure out how to truly evaluate who you are as a candidate.
All right. Assuming nothing more to add on that one, we broadly understand their evaluation criteria, so we know what they look for with their respective institutions. Now I'm going to get into more specific questions on how a candidate can actually stand out, right? Some of them may have lower UGC GPA, some of them may not have really strong LORs as such, some may face challenges in or may not have strong extracurriculars or a well-rounded profile, or let's say some other challenge in the profile, right? So what can a candidate do to really stand out and make that stellar application to your respective institutions? What can they do to defend their weak areas in the profile?
Yeah, I can take this one. In answer to that question, I love something that I've heard Mark say before, which is very much, you can only control the things you can control. So in that regard, you can't go back in time and change your first year grades. You can't change what major you did for your undergraduate studies whenever you completed them. But you can use your statement of purpose and your resume and your letters of recommendation to really highlight your strengths and introduce yourselves to the program and let us know what you think we need to know. So if you're a little worried about your CGPA, you can really highlight any research or projects or work experience you have on that resume and statement of purpose. And you can be very mindful in who you're asking to write your letters of recommendation. You know, some students come in and they ask, well, my brother's best friend's uncle is the CEO of a great company in my field. Can he write me a letter of recommendation? Will that help? And unfortunately, for the holistic review that we do in the US, not really, if that person does not know you and hasn't worked with you or studied with you personally. You know, we're looking for people who can speak specifically to you and your ability to succeed in a graduate program, not really the level of their title or anything of that regard. So make sure that you're connecting with your faculty, that you are reaching out to them outside of class hours and developing a relationship so that when it comes time to ask them for a letter, they're going to be happy and helpful, and they're going to know who you are and be able to be the best representative of you.
All right. So anything else, any other ways they can compensate for some of the other weaknesses in their profile? Any
think
thoughts on go ahead,
a
Mark.
lot of this has to do with like how much is too much, you know, like we can't tell you at what point the straws are going to break the camel's back, but if everything's bad, maybe you need a different route to graduate school. Maybe you need to work a little harder in your professional world to separate yourself from your academics. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to not just gauge whether or not a student's going to pass through our program, but whether or not they're going to thrive, whether or not they're going to succeed, whether or not they're going to be memorable enough for our faculty to say we want more students like that. So if you are far enough away distance from that identity, perhaps it's time to maybe take some more courses, do a couple Coursera's, do something that will help to elevate your academic profile. If it's testing, maybe a study course for the GRE is the right path for you. I mean, you are investing in your future, but you also have to invest in us getting to the point where we allow you to make that happen. So while I totally understand like the shortcomings, unfortunately, there is a point, like we can't take everyone we like. And even when those personal qualities are fantastic, our faculty will say, but will they pass my class? Or will they thrive in my class? And we want thrivers. We don't just want people who are going to survive graduate school.
All right. So we did touch upon, Mark, you did touch upon GRE a little, but to get a little more detailed on that, GRE is optional for most of the programs or varies from program to program, but can a strong GRE score compensate for low CGPA?
I'll start. I'm sure others will have things to add, but yes, on some levels, absolutely, but there's always a flip side to the coin. I studied philosophy in college, so it might come across in some of my responses. At some point, a high GMAT, GRE will just give us evidence that you should have done better. So yes, it can absolutely, highlight that a student is intelligent and can do well, but you don't want it to raise too many questions about why your grades don't also align with your GMAT or your GRE. But GREs do show they are, aligned with how successful a student can be in graduate school. So that's why for the programs that do require them, that's sort of what they're looking at. So absolutely. And this is where, to Kat's point about the personal statement, like if there are things for us to know, please make sure that you're interjecting those in the additional information section of the application, or if there's anything else we should know about you. We all have sections in our application where students can share a little bit more about what was going on, or things that, grades and transcripts do not quite tell us. So however you find an outlet to convey what happened or what we should know about you, we will appreciate the insight.
Right. Great. If nothing more to add on this one, I want to move to the next question and talk about the most common mistakes that you see applicants make to your respective institutions when they're submitting the application. What are some pitfalls that they need to be conscious about? If there's a checklist of 5-6 things that they need to be absolutely careful about. Liana, Megan, you want to take a shot at this?
Yeah, definitely. I think putting the wrong name of the school is kind of like our go-to. Every year we read essays about how much a student is looking forward to going to NYU or Princeton because they uploaded the wrong essay or they didn't edit it correctly. But speaking to that, I also really don't recommend writing a one-size-fits-all essay where you only change the name of the school. We're reading your essays, and while we do want to hear about your background and your passions and goals, it's also really important that you do your research and explain to us why you feel that we are a good fit for you, what you're looking forward to, why you want to attend Columbia Engineering, and what specifically about the opportunities provided here are exciting to you. So it's really important to do your research and to be specific.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Megan said. And I would say that one of the things I notice, especially with talking to candidates from India, is that people get very hung up on, is work experience going to help me? If I have 2 years of work experience, is it going to help me? What about 3 years? Is that better? What about if I do a research paper or 2 research papers or 3 research papers? What is the number I need to get admitted? And I find that students get so hyper-focused on like a formula to figure out the perfect equation of the number of work experience, number of papers, number of grades that's going to get them admitted, that you lose track of the fact that what we are looking for is to figure out what Mark said is, are you going to fit at our school? Are you going to be successful in this program? Applying to graduate school is very different from applying to undergrad. We're not just taking the best candidates. We're not trying to shape a class. We're trying to find people who are passionate about our subjects. So if you're applying to a program in mechanical engineering, we want to know why. Why do you want to come to New York? Why do you want to come to NYU? Is there a professor here that you're looking forward to working with? What kind of research, what path got you here? We don't care if your path is work experience or research or projects you've done, or your dad was an engineer, or whatever path you have, it's your path. And I find that the biggest mistake is people try and fit their path and who they are into a formula that they think is going to get them admitted. And the truth is, if your path is not the one that's going to lead you to our school, then probably you should look at other schools as well. So what I'm trying to say is, like, don't get so hung up on the details. If you had 2 years of work experience, tell us you had 2 years of work experience. And why did that work experience make you want to apply to graduate school? What did you learn? Did it help you change your mind about what direction you wanted to go? Or did it help solidify that, yes, computer science is what you want to do and this is why? Applying to graduate school is very practical. And so I would just say keep that always in mind, that your path is a good path, and just explain to us who you are, how you got to where you are and why you're applying to us, and how you think that our programs are going to help you achieve what goals you have in your life.
Perfect. That makes sense. Uh, Moving on, I wanted to understand from you that we all spoke about the importance of UG CGPA, so prior academics. Is there a minimum that you look for? And what if someone doesn't meet that minimum?
So I can start this off. I think that aligns very well with what Leanna was saying. Like, it's not stackable. If I get this, then I can be admitted. And it's the same for cumulative GPAs. I always say that GPAs don't tell us everything. Actually, they tell us almost nothing. Because we don't even know the amount of classes that a student's taken from a CGPA. What I look at in the transcript is a lot more insight. I'm looking for what was their major, what was their concentration, what did they study, what are the specific courses that align with the program that they want to pursue, and how did they do in those classes. If a student starts very, very weak and ends up doing really, really well when the classes are getting much harder, their CGPA is going to be the same as someone who started in their first year very strong, and as classes got harder, plummeted. We want the former, right? We don't want someone who in their senior year really couldn't handle the workload. We want someone who improved. And in the US, we love an underdog story. So if you're going to struggle but find your footing later on and then end up blowing us away in your final year, that's wonderful. That CGPA doesn't tell me that academic trajectory. So it's very important to know that we focus on the entire transcript. And I will pass it off to any other colleagues that want to add to that.
Yeah, the other thing I would just add is that there is a published minimum, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the same for every one of our 33 programs. Some of our programs are more competitive, some are less competitive. And in addition, a lot of the faculty, we have different groups of people applying every year. And so one year, a student with a lower CGPA might get in. Another year that there might be more applicants and they may get have the cutoff be a higher CGPA. So again, it's not as much about what your CGPA is as how you are presenting yourself and explaining if you have lower marks, what happened and why you think you will still be successful in graduate school.
Interesting. Great. If nothing more to add on the academics front, what I want to do is now segue into a little different segment. And I am going to talk about career services and all of that, but I missed a very important question about application. I'm going to pick that up before I go on to careers. This is about the letters of recommendations. Who should they go to? Who makes a good recommender? And again, some pitfalls that they should avoid while selecting their recommender. Kat, Nathan. Okay.
So this really depends on the individual student and their background. Usually, for Columbia Engineering, we do recommend that 2 of the 3 letters that we require come from academic sources, but this changes for students who graduated and then went into the workforce for a couple of years. So it really depends on what your background looks like. But at that point, it would be much more relevant to have someone who you have a more recent and close connection with. But no matter who you ask, the main thing to ask yourself when you're trying to decide who you want to provide these letters is, does this person really know me? Can they really speak to my skills and abilities and even non-tangible aspects of my personality? That's really who you want writing your letters for you.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, what I would say is not only are we looking for somebody who knows you specifically and can speak about your merits as a prospective student, but ideally what we're looking for is somebody who is an authority in the field of study that you're applying to. So, if you're applying for computer science, your art teacher might love you and think you're an amazing person, but they can't really speak to your abilities to succeed in computer science. Now, I know that there are students who want to change their major from undergrad to grad, so that's not always a mandatory requirement, but it is something we look for. So ideally somebody who can speak to your technical skills, who has some frame of reference for what you want to do in your graduate studies, who has some knowledge and authority to speak on it, is going to be much more insightful about your ability to succeed. So that's one thing that we look for.
Sorry, perfect. So I hope that gives you insight on who to select or who to go to for your recommendations. Now, what I want to do is transition into a little more about visa pathways, the job market, and so on and so forth. I know there are a lot of audience questions. I am going to try and take up as many of those as possible. We are already at 61 questions. But that does scare me a little, but we'll pick the most important questions to ask them. There are also questions around application fee waivers. We will talk about those as well very shortly. But the first question which I want to understand and go to is the visa pathways, right? So I know a lot of you have heard about OPT, CPT, and it can be a little confusing. So if any of our panelists would be kind enough to clarify for the audience what all of this means and how all of this comes together.
I can take this.
All right.
So as international students who are planning on applying to the US, you will most likely study on what's known as an F1 non-immigrant student visa. This would mean that after you are admitted to a graduate program, you would receive what's known as an I-20 form document that has all of your biographic and programmatic and school information, and you would use that to go to your US embassy or consulate and apply for your F1 visa that allows you to come to the United States and live and study and potentially engage in work experience. Now, the thing to know about work experience when you're on an F1 student visa is, as I mentioned, it's a non-immigrant student visa. So your main purpose for being in the US on this visa is to study and be a student and focus on your education. So what that means is that typically there are going to be some restrictions about when and where you can work during your program. Typically during your first year in your program, or for a certain number of credits, depending on how the school interprets it, you are restricted to only working on campus if you want to engage in work experience. So at GW, we interpret that for the first academic year, fall and spring, you can only work on campus. After that time period, you can engage in what's known as CPT, which is curricular practical training that allows you to work off campus in an internship or a job related to your field of study for a certain amount of time. If it's the summer months, you can work beyond part-time, which is anything beyond 20 hours. 40 hours is a normal full week. If you want to do 60 or 80, I won't stop you. I have students who've done that. It seems miserable, but they like it. And then after you graduate, you all as F1 students are eligible for something known as OPT, optional practical training, which allows all F1 students to stay in the United States for 1 additional year and engage in work experience, again, in a job related to your field of study. Now, some students in select STEM programs qualify for the STEM OPT extension, which means that after that 1 12-month period of OPT, you qualify for an additional 2 years of STEM OPT. So for example, at GW Engineering, all of our I-20 granting programs qualify for the STEM OPT extension, which means you can stay in the United States post-graduation on your F1 student visa for a maximum of 3 years getting work experience before you ever have to apply for another graduate program, return home, or talk to your employers about potentially sponsoring you for a work visa. And that's a brief overview of the entire process. And of course, if you have any questions during this, you can always reach out to the school you're applying to. They always have dedicated international offices that work with these students to help and make clear all of these regulations.
Awesome. So that was wonderfully comprehensive. In the interest of time, I'm not going to dig more on the visa aspects. I think there's some overview, there's clear overview, which Catherine has given you. If you have more questions, reach out to the schools or ask them in the Q&A box. I'm going to take the last 2 questions from my end, and then I'm going to start picking up the audience question. My next question is particularly relevant to today's job market. We keep hearing scary news from around the world, right? Everyone keeps talking about there was supposed to be a recession in 2023, which surprisingly didn't happen, and stock markets and everything is at an all-time high. How's the job market looking in the US currently? I know you have cohorts graduating very soon this year. How's the employment rates looking for them, and any challenges that they are facing? And secondly, what are your respective institutions doing to prepare your students for the job market? Do we want to start with NYU?
I think Mark wanted to start. I saw him unmute.
I mean, I think we're going to say all the same things, so
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
We all have very comprehensive career services, and there's a reason why our reputation usually precedes us. Our students are doing very well, our alumni are thriving, and they're looking out for themselves, right? They're looking out for students who went to their school, they're looking out for others within their network. So you're joining powerful networks. And even if there's bad news, it has not phased our job prospects thus far. Our students are landing wonderful internships. Many of them are securing job offers through those. So although it is challenging, it's not easy. You do have to put in the work. We do have a lot of folks who are devoted to making sure that you are going to be rewarded at the end of this process, as long as you put in the work. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple things. So I know, especially last year, there was a lot of scary news about layoffs at big tech companies, and some of us have very large computer science programs, and a lot of students are interested in that pathway. During that time, we did have some students who had their job offers rescinded from those big companies. And what we did in that case with these services that Mark talked about is that our career counselors reached out to all of those students, offered them individual counseling and helping them figure out another path. And that's one thing I really want to emphasize in terms of the job market, that whatever is in the news is always the most sensationalized. But last year there were actually more jobs added in tech than taken away. And these jobs may not be at the companies you've heard of. They may not be at Google or Amazon or any of these big companies that had overhired during the pandemic. But that's really where it's helpful to utilize the services that we have, because our career services can help direct you to other smaller companies or other industries that are also looking for programmers and software engineers to do the same kind of work, but maybe just not what you had initially thought. And so that's one thing I really want to emphasize, is that the career prospects are still very good, and unemployment is very low in the US, and but it may not just be exactly what you had pictured for yourself. The other thing I wanted to emphasize, I actually just had a mind blank and forgot, so I'll come back to it in a minute.
Yeah. Great. I want to bring in one aspect, and this is regarding the location. So all of you are East Coast schools. All of you are based on the US East Coast as such. Now, do you see any geographical limitations when it comes to opportunities for your students? What if someone doesn't want the colder East Coast weather, but wants to be in California, right? San Francisco or the West Coast or Seattle? Then do your graduates see employment opportunities in other parts of the states as well? And what about international employment? Any opportunities outside of the US as well?
Doesn't want to be on the East Coast. No, we have students go all over the place. After they graduate, we have students go to the West Coast. We have students find opportunities internationally. Some students go back home after they've finished, especially students who had plans that from the beginning. Some folks do have plans to use their degree and take these things to apply them to their communities at home. So there are really a wide range of options available to you.
Yeah, and I would just add, look at the cities that we're located in: Boston, New York, Washington, D.C. These are some of the biggest industry centers in the United States. And what that means is that a lot of companies, whether big or small, have branches or business that happen in these cities. And so we may have, especially in New York, we may have students working at a certain company in the city, doing an internship here, and then getting a job at one of the many branches across the US or across the world afterward. So that is another thing that I think is important, is looking at places that are tied to an industry that you're interested in, and are there opportunities there for internships or for jobs. for making networking connections and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I will add tangentially to what Leanna said earlier, there are companies that also have bases all over the world. So you may end up in the Toronto office of Google instead of the Boston office. As long as you're willing and open to opportunities, I think that there can be a lot of flexibility there. So it's helpful to be flexible.
Oh, and I'm so sorry. I will not talk again. I'll let other people have a chance. But I did remember what I was going to say earlier, which is that as a student, actually, I'm so sorry. My mind just went blank again. I apologize. I'll remember again.
No
I'll
worries.
Anna a moment to think of it. I just wanted to share that a lot of our career services office also posts data about our graduates who are willing to share that information. So I always encourage students to check out those websites. So for GW Engineering, I know specifically that our career services office does survey our recent alum and ask where have they ended up, what jobs have they taken, what companies are they at, what's their average salary, and that information is readily available to you if you want to take a look. If you really do want to be on the West Coast, you can see how a number of our students are there, are doing the work. So just make sure that you're always doing research. We are one resource for you to find information. This event is one resource, but our websites are available: Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, TikTok, whatever you'd like. It's all out there for you to find more information if you're curious.
Yeah. And I remembered, but I'm so sorry, I've been sick, so my mind is a little bit scrambled. But the thing I wanted to say, which is extremely important, is that last year, and this happens every year, we had a bunch of students who were graduating and were very stressed out about their job search. And they work in our office where, they know everything about admissions, they help you with the process. And I asked them, well, have you talked to the Career Center? And not once in their entire 2 years had they accessed the Career Center, had they gone to talk to all of to take advantage of all the resources we have. At NYU, we have 3 levels of career services for these students, and we try and advertise it constantly. And so I was completely surprised when I found out that these students had not taken advantage of that. And so I do want to encourage you a lot to, first of all, when you get into a program, to take advantage of those resources. And second, when you're hearing rumors of things like, oh, my friend of a friend didn't get a job, maybe ask if they ever talked to the career service, if they did anything to try to get a job besides their own, minimal effort. And we have so many resources and people are very dedicated to this. It goes into our rankings on how many of our students get jobs after they graduate. And so we are doing everything in our power to help those dreams come true.
Super. And all 4 of them are highly reputed institutions. You have a good brand, they have strong alumni networks, strong industry connects as well. So a lot of doors do open given the institutions that you go and study at. With that, I want to move to the audience questions. We are 45 minutes into the session. There are still 330 plus people in this room, so I can imagine the interest which is there. And the very first and the most awaited question I have is around application fee waivers. Are all of you willing to offer application fee waivers to attendees of this session? Yes? Okay. Great. They all nodded yeses. I have that on the record. We have the application fee waiver process. So at Seed, we have the application fee waiver process for all of them. What we'll do is post this session by tomorrow or day after. You'll receive a WhatsApp or and an email from our end. We will give you a document which outlines the application fee waiver process for all 4 of them. So by attending this session, you have become eligible to get the application fee waiver to all 4 of them. And we will share the process from our end for that. They have different codes. Each one has a different process. I don't want to take up time sharing the process right now. We're going to put that in an email and share that with you by tomorrow or day after latest. Great. So Tejas and everyone else who asked about the application fee waiver, I hope that addresses your concern and your request is accepted over there. The next question, or the most common questions that I'm seeing, these are around the amount of scholarships that they can expect, right? I know for GW, BU, And NYU, you have committed some exclusive scholarships to the Seed Scholarships Fund. We know the percentages for those. But besides that, any other scholarships that they can look at, and Megan, for Columbia, any funding that may be available to the students?
So we'll start with us with the benefits. So most of our MS students are self-funded. We have full funding for all of our PhD students, which includes the MS to PhD track students. However, again, largely self-funded for our MS students. However, there are teaching and research assistantships that are available for students in MS programs once they begin the program. We also do have some fellowships and scholarships available. I will put a link to them in the chat, but just be aware that we do not offer merit scholarship, which is what I think my colleagues here will talk about, their merit scholarship structure, where they will assess your application and make that decision then. We do not have a structure set up like that, so it's just something good to be aware of.
All right. What I'm going to do quickly, in the interest of everyone's time, I want to share, sorry, those are my list of questions for the panelists, but if you're able to see my screen now, what I'm doing is I'm sharing the screen for the Seed Scholarships Fund. As I mentioned, BU, so Boston University College of Arts and Sciences, GW Engineering, and NYU have committed some exclusive scholarships to this fund. These scholarships vary between 25% of their tuition fees to up to 75% of their tuition fees. So varies from school to school. Some have up to 50%. Some have, I know GW Engineering has up to 75%. BU, I think, is around up to 50%. Same with NYU, there's up to 50%. So there are some exclusive scholarships which are available through the Seed Scholarship Fund. If you haven't applied, you can apply for these respective scholarships over there. You can also see the amount of funding that is available. So 75, 50, 25%, this is the range, the criteria, all of that is over here. So you can apply for the scholarships over here. If you're applying to Columbia and you're looking for funding, you can also apply to the Seed STEM Leadership Scholarship. This is one scholarship worth $5,000. If you get through to Columbia, then you're eligible to be considered for the Seed Scholarship Fund. Of course, it's competitive. It's only one award for the STEM field as such, and many schools coming into that. But if you are interested, you can apply for the Seed STEM Leadership Scholarship for Columbia, and we'll evaluate you for that as well. I want to go back to the panelists and ask them about any other ways of funding that the candidates can look for. So scholarships is one aspect, but besides scholarships, what are the other avenues of funding that you've seen your previous students tap into to fund their studies at your respective institutions? And if you're comfortable talking about the ROI, right, usually how long does it take for your graduates to recoup the investment, and what is the usual payback period, if anyone wants to talk about that? Mark?
Sure. So there are loans available to international students as well. Empower and Prodigy are the two that come to mind that many of our students utilize. In terms of ROI, it varies so widely. I feel like this is an unfair question to someone who has 30 master's programs, some of them in the humanities, some of them in very high flying tech fields as well. If you are looking at artificial intelligence in our computer science department, starting salaries typically are in the six figures. If you're looking at one of our humanities programs, say for instance in preservation studies, your work will be appreciated, but your value will not be in your salary. So it does vary, but our students, I would say just keep digging in terms of, we don't hide our ROI information from our students. So it really does depend. And what I would say is also connect with the departments directly, because the departments have their finger on the pulse of their fields, of what's happening, and also the success of their students.
All right. Anyone wants to add anything to this? No? Okay, great. So just from my end, we did some research a few years ago. What we saw that usually if you go to a good school, then you're usually in the next, you're within 3 to 5 years of completing your studies, you're able to recoup all your investment. And then the payback that you earn over the next 15, 20, 30 years of your career is just the profit that you keep on accumulating basis the skills and the competencies that you've picked. But usual payback period for loans tends to be around 3 to 5 years post completing your graduate studies at most of the reputed universities. with that, I think I have spoken a bit about funding. I've also posted the link to the Seed Scholarships Fund, and Megan, Catherine have posted the links to their respective scholarship funds as well. So you can tap into that, look at the criteria, and apply to any of the exclusive scholarships that you can look at. What I want to do is, since this is a common question coming up for NYU, I just want to get it out of the way. Liana, this is a question from those people who have applied in the priority deadline of 1st December. By when can they expect the decision for NYU?
Yeah, so I would say you can what happens usually with that priority deadline is that we get a large amount of applications. Last year we had 12,000 applications, and so we have to review all of those. What usually happens is the faculty will look at the people they got from the priority deadline and divide them into 3 different groups. They will have the people they're definitely admitting, the people they're definitely denying, and then they will have a middle group that they will usually hang on to until the second deadline. So you may have some friends that have heard back, you may have some that have been denied or accepted, but if you haven't heard back, we won't guarantee a decision until after the second deadline. The majority of faculty have been on break for the last 3 weeks, and so they've started this week rolling out a lot of their decisions, but I wouldn't get impatient in at least for another 6 weeks or so.
All right.
I just want to piggyback 2 things on that. Sorry. The first one is one of the things that you should avoid is emailing us several times, angrier and angrier that you don't have a decision, because you're going to help make it an easy one. And there are people behind all of the emails that you write. So spell check, make sure that you're sounding intelligent when you send those off on a bus, on your phone, because we will take notes. So one of the warnings. And the second one, and I noticed it was coming up, is how can I get a scholarship? How do I apply? All of our scholarships, I think, you're automatically evaluated unless it specifically says on our website that you need to apply. So if it doesn't say you have to apply, you'll automatically be evaluated. Sorry, Sanjay.
No worries, that was useful. So Adarsh, Harsh, and I know some people had asked about BU's programs as well. I hope this addresses your question around the timelines for decision making. What I want to do is quickly check. So Rafael, we have addressed your question as well about the application fee waiver. Those of you who missed it earlier, from Seed, you'll get an email by either tomorrow or day after, which would have the application fee waiver process outlined for all 4 of them. So you don't need to check for each one individually. We'll send you the details for each one of them. Okay. Megan, the next question which I'm going to pick up is specific to Columbia. This is around the video interview requirement for the MS programs at Columbia. If you can just give an overview of how that entire thing works, and if someone does it badly the first time due to technical issues or mic issues, can they reattempt? Is there a second chance or not?
Sure. So we do require a video interview for all of our MS applicants. This will happen after you've submitted the initial application. You'll then in the portal be prompted to complete that video interview. We'll give you about a minute to prepare and then 3 minutes to answer 3 different questions. The questions are randomized. This is not a pop quiz. We're trying to get to know you a lot better. So we'll ask you maybe questions about ethics, questions about your background, but we'll also ask you fun questions. We might ask you to tell us a joke or what your favorite food is. So try not to over prepare. Just be ready to be yourself, because that's what we're really trying to gain from the video interview, is getting to know what you might be like in a classroom, how you'll interact with your peers and your professors. That sums it up.
Great. So I know Anmaya, I hope this addresses your question, but I know there are a lot of questions which are still left. There are 80+ questions in the Q&A box. My request to the audience is, if you can also, besides me, if you can also go through these questions and upvote the question that you find most important. So vote on the one question that you find most important. That would tell me which are the most relevant and important questions for you. And I will pick up the top or the most upvoted questions to ask our panelists. We may exceed this session by say 10 or 15 minutes. Is everyone okay extending by 10-15 minutes? No one's got a hard deadline? Okay, great. So I'm going to continue picking up the questions in the interest for the audience. Uh, uh, okay, so the next question is from Shubhangi. I've seen your question about whether Columbia University's MS Data Sciences program and NYU's Data Sciences program considered for the scholarships or not. If my understanding is correct, Liana, the NYU scholarships that you've committed through the Seed Scholarships Fund, those are program agnostic. Those are for all NYU MS programs as such. Would that be correct?
You are correct, except that the fact is that we have several different data science programs, and the main one that students think of is based in the Center for Data Science, which is not part of Tandon. And so I don't have any information about scholarships for that program. But if it is a Tandon program, then it will be considered for scholarships.
All right. And Megan, for Columbia, you shared the link where people can apply. So Megan can talk about that, but the Seed STEM Leadership Scholarship, for which we can consider you for Columbia scholarship as well. That's again program agnostic. You can apply to any of the Columbia engineering programs, and we'll consider you for that scholarship for the Seed STEM Leadership Scholarship specifically. But Megan, if there's any different criteria for Columbia merit scholarships or need-based scholarships, if you want to specify.
No, so because we don't offer that kind of scholarship, the ones that we do are all very unique. So have unique requirements, unique amounts. So each one is completely different. It's really important that when you're looking through that list, that you pay very close attention to what those requirements are, because again, they're all completely different from each other.
Perfect. The next question is actually very interesting, and I'm surprised that I missed this in my list of questions for you. This question has been asked by Shrishel, and here it's now the most voted question. It's about rankings. So a lot of the candidates get told that don't worry about rankings so much. Rankings don't matter so much. All four of you are highly ranked institutions, very reputed, very well known across the world. So what differentiates you from others, and where does ranking come into play, right? How does one go ahead with selecting the institutions? There's US News rankings, there's QS rankings, there's so many other rankings. How do you recommend the candidates to consider rankings in their consideration set when they are evaluating their respective institutions?
Oh,
Oh,
Leanna, you
I'll
can
go ahead. I'll start. And basically, what I would say is that I mentioned earlier that applying to graduate school is very different from applying to an undergraduate or bachelor's degree program. And one of the reasons is this ranking discussion. It is important to know that all of our schools are highly ranked. We have a great reputation overall. We have, as Mark mentioned, a great alumni network. But when you are considering rankings for a graduate program, unfortunately, it's not just an easy answer. You really need to drill down into what you are interested in, because a graduate program is further training in a very specific area. So for example, NYU may have a high ranking overall, but maybe the program that you're interested in, or even the specific field within that program, is not one of our strengths. One example is that we don't really have a aerospace graduate program. So a lot of people come to us and say they want to study aerospace engineering. We have a great ranking overall, but we have some research, but it's not our specialty. However, we have some of the programs that are very highly ranked. One thing that I like to explain is, when people are looking for, my father was looking for a PhD program in geology when he was going to school. He got accepted to Stanford, which is an Ivy League program. And he got accepted to the University of Wisconsin, which is also a great school, but didn't have the same reputation as Stanford. But the specific field that he wanted to study was the #1 program in the country at the University of Wisconsin. And so he ended up going to that program. And so what I'm trying to say is that rankings are important, but what is more important is finding the specific match or the ranking drilled down to what it is that you want to study. And that is a little more work on you, but graduate school is so important that it is worth the extra work that you need to do.
All right. So I know Mark has something to say about rankings. so I'm going to let him go ahead. Otherwise, I was going to take the chance, but go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, no. I fully agree with everything Leanna said, and I think it sums it up very nicely because student gets fixated on a number. And if you're going to look at rankings, first start with the methodology. How did they come up with those numbers? Where did they come from? If you understand the methodology and you agree with the methodology, by all means, lean into the ranking. If you don't, then someone's just giving you a list. And whether or not a school is highly ranked, if they're not highly ranked in your program, they're still a bad fit. So I will echo that in the context of find the right fit for you, not the best ranking that you got into.
Perfect. So two important things to note over here. Look at program-specific information rather than just university-level rankings. So low-ranked university may have a really strong program of interest for you and vice versa as well. And secondly, rankings can be a starting point, but dig deeper, look into the program features, the faculty, the research that they are doing, the alumni network that they have in that particular industry, the location or the industry connect they have, and use all of that information to arrive at your chosen program rather than just looking at one aspect of ranking. So great. The next question is from Vivek, and this may be relevant to other people as well. What is the right time to apply to your programs? If, let's say, someone is completing their undergrad education in 2025, the summer of 2025, then when do they start working on their applications for you?
Yeah, I can take this. So if a student is looking to begin their graduate studies the immediate next semester after they graduate from their bachelor's degree, we encourage students to start applying during their final year. Typically, students will graduate in the spring and start their graduate studies in the fall. So deadlines will typically fall around December, January, February. It will depend on the program you're applying to. So for GW Engineering, all of our program deadlines is January 15th. That's coming up next week. For master's programs, that's a priority deadline. So while we'll continue to accept applications after that date for masters, especially if you're looking for funding, you should have everything submitted by that deadline. So working on it during that fall semester of your undergraduate study, getting everything prepared so that it is submitted by the deadline is going to be the most important thing. We require a minimum of 6 semesters to look at. Ideally, we want to see 7. So we know, obviously, if you're applying, if you submit your application in November, you haven't finished your fall studies yet, that's okay. We might follow up with you and ask for an updated transcript. So make sure that you're monitoring your email and paying attention to anything that you might get. Check your spam folder to make sure nothing's getting misdirected, and respond accordingly and as quickly as possible so that you can get your decision before you graduate and enroll in studies in August or September.
So basically, you can apply in the final year of your studies, even though you may not have your final transcripts, you may just have till 6th or ideally till the 7th semester. You can still apply using those transcripts. The school may put in some additional conditions for you to fulfill later, but you can mainly apply during the final year of your undergraduate studies for a graduate or a postgraduate program, basically. Okay. Mohammed, I've seen your question. Those are 3 different questions, but we have already addressed those in separate questions. So we have spoken about scholarships, low CGPA, and all of that. If you have missed that segment, then the recording of this session is available on SEED's YouTube channel. You can go there, look through the recording, and get responses to your the 3 questions. All 3 of them have been addressed at various points during our conversation today. I want to take up this next question from Shubhangi, and this is relevant for a lot of students who are in this room today. It's about the COVID study experience. A lot of them did their, let's say, the first, second, or third year of undergraduate studies online during COVID times. And I would personally believe it's very difficult to teach engineering just through online videos. There needs to be a lot of lab and practice, which they may have missed. So when you look at their transcripts, do you take all of that into account? Do you consider or give them some leeway because of their COVID time study experience? Megan, you want to take this? Any exceptions for COVID time? No? Okay. Anyone else?
I would just remind you that there are faculty members that are reading these applications and they know what their students went through. There were a lot of challenges, and even though we all suffered through COVID, some of us suffered more if you actually were impacted. You should mention that in your application. Don't dwell on your whole personal statement being about COVID, but the additional information section, you can certainly write like if you were out of commission for a few weeks or something like that. Yes, we definitely would like to know about that. At the end of the day, all of our students were impacted. So the benefit is that it's not something that's foreign to us. However, within reason, is what I would say as well. Like a lot of students were. So if you do have a unique story within that context, then definitely don't keep it to yourself.
I'll also add that not only did our own students and faculty go through the COVID experience, but every other applicant that you are competing against also went through the COVID experience. And so it's not like your experience is unique and no one else went through it. But as Mark said, if there's some certain circumstance that you do think is unique about your specific experience, that's something. But in terms of just taking online courses, not having the hands-on work that you wish you had, the wish you've been able to have, that sort of thing, the entire applicant pool has gone through the same thing. And so that is not something that is unique to your experience.
All right, so it was a common experience for everyone, so everyone's been through that. And if you have some special situation or story to explain, then use the SOP or the optional essays to explain that and possibly clarify the issues that you may have over there. Great, I hope that addresses the questions. So last 5 minutes, if you still have any important questions, my request is post them now or put the questions already asked. And let me see what is the next important question. Okay. So the question which is coming up, and this is respect to deadlines, the upcoming deadlines. So firstly, the first part is you accept applicants with backlogs. So not sure if you're familiar with this term, but let me clarify. In India and other parts, if you're not clearing the score for a particular course, in let's say your third year, then you can take that course in the fourth year, give the exam then and clear your backlog as such. So basically it's a carry forward of a course to the next term because you didn't clear it in the first term. So how do you look at backlogs in the transcripts if someone has had multiple backlogs? And secondly, is there still time to apply for the fall 2024 intake?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the backlog question. So one thing to always pay attention to when you're looking at applying to graduate school is what are the requirements regarding transcripts. Some schools are going to require that you submit an official credential evaluation from an external company like WES or ECE or someone else. For GW Engineering, we do not. We will do in-house credential evaluations, which means we are very familiar with backlogs and very familiar with Indian transcripts and individual semester mark sheets and what those look like. It also means that we're familiar with the differences in testing feelings or processes in India versus the United States. So in the US, backlogs are not a thing. If a student resits a class, it's usually a one-time opportunity, and that original failure will be listed on the transcript. We understand that in India, that testing process is a little different and that there are different cultural norms about this. So it's okay if you have 1 or 2 backlogs. It might become a concern if you have 10, 20, 30. I've seen some pretty high numbers. Because of those differences, where in the US, we do not allow students to resit exams. So we're looking to make sure that you can succeed in a graduate program in the US, which means you have to be able to typically finish your courses in that first attempt. So again, cultural norms, we understand those differences. It's not going to hurt you if you have a couple. If you have a lot, however, that is something that you should be thinking about and maybe addressing in that statement of purpose to really let us know if there are extenuating circumstances that contributed to that high number of backlogs.
All right. The next part of the question, still time for the fall 2024 intake applications.
Yes,
So I know Jan 15th is the deadline. Mark, Liana, your deadlines, Megan, your deadline.
Our deadline is February 15th.
So NYU is Feb 15th, GW is Jan 15th. Mark, for BU?
Varies by department, but many of them are still accepting applications.
All right. And Megan, for Columbia?
It's the same situation. So it is dependent on program, but usually sometime between right now and February 15th for the priority deadline. Similar to what Kat was talking about earlier, we do continue to take applications after the priority deadline, but we really recommend that you submit before then.
All right. So still time for all of their deadlines. So Jan 15th is the earliest for GW. Kat, I believe that even after Jan 15th, you'll continue to accept applications on a rolling basis.
We will continue to accept applications for master's programs. For PhD, Jan 15th is a hardline deadline. You may have a few days, like until the end of next week to finish things, but after that, we will withdraw any incomplete applications or ask you to defer to a future semester. But masters will typically continue to accept through March, and after that, it's a case-by-case basis.
Do you also consider candidates for scholarships if they're applying after the priority deadlines, or let's say the Jan 15th or the Feb 15 deadlines? Would they still be considered for any scholarships if available?
For GW, yes, we will continue to consider you, but obviously keep in mind it's a priority deadline for a reason. Jan 15th is when we have the most amount of funding available, and the longer it takes you to submit or complete your application, the less funding we have available. So that's something to keep in mind. Just because you submit by Jan 15th, if I'm following up with you for 3 months trying to get your English language test scores and we don't review you until March, you're being considered with the March candidates for funding, not the Jan 15th candidates.
All right. So while there may still be opportunity to apply after their deadlines, apply as soon as possible, improves your chances of getting an admission, improves your chances of getting a scholarship. Let me also tell you that the next deadline for the Seed Scholarships Fund is also Jan 15th. It's a much simpler application than the school application. So if you're applying to any of these schools and want to be considered for the scholarships as well, I'm reposting the link to the Seed Scholarships Fund. The next deadline is Jan 15th. This is the round 2. Round 1 is already done. So if you're interested, apply to any of those scholarships by Jan 15th, and you can continue submitting the school applications post that or by their respective deadlines as well for consideration. We did touch upon the PhD program briefly. I know there was a question about this earlier. I know over time, but I still want to take up 1 or 2 more questions. Can they apply for a PhD program directly after their bachelor's? Or is it necessary to do a master's before they apply to your respective PhD programs?
So it's complicated. Basically, we do require the students have an MS degree when they apply to a PhD program, unless they're applying to the MS to PhD track program. This is specifically for those students who finish their undergraduate program and know that they want to go into the PhD or academia. And should you be admitted to that program, you'll be funded just like a PhD student. You are essentially a PhD student. It's just listed as a different program with MS coursework wrapped into it.
All right. Do any of you accept direct entry into PhD programs post-bachelor's?
We do. Oh, go ahead, Kat.
Sorry, at GW Engineering, we do accept direct entry. Just know that if you are admitted, there is a higher number of credits that you need to complete, and we do not offer an MS to PhD track. So if you want to have a master's and a PhD when you graduate, you would need to do a master's and then apply for the PhD program separately, which is just not combined at GW Engineering, unfortunately.
I would say that's the same with us, but again, when you really drill down, every answer depends on the program. Each faculty has a different criteria of what they're looking for, and especially with the PhD program, because you're not just dealing with faculty committees, you're dealing with individual faculties who have funding and are looking to hire PhD students. And so some of these faculty want people who are going to be with them for a longer amount of time. So having just a bachelor's degree and not a master's is a plus, and some people want to hire PhD students that have more experience, and so they would be looking for someone with a master's. But if you know you want to do a PhD and you think you're a good candidate, you should apply, whether or not you have a master's degree.
Absolutely. And the advice I would give for a student who's thinking about this is, does your profile as it currently stands compete with students who have master's degrees? If the answer is yes, then you're a great candidate. If not, then you might want to look for a master's program or some outlet, research, whatever, to complement what you've done.
All right, great. So thank you for that. I know we are over time and still a lot of questions coming in, but what I'm realizing going through these questions is a lot of these questions are personal questions. They are relevant to only the person asking them and not relevant to the wider audience. So my request to the audience would be that for specific questions, your profile specific questions, where you're talking about you have this much work experience, or you have a gap, or you have a previous master's and looking at a second master's, and so on and so forth. My advice would be to reach out to the schools directly. Check out their website as well. You'll find the evaluation criteria, you'll find the admission criteria. You'll also find FAQ sections for a lot of them. So go through that. And if you still have some unaddressed questions, write to them with your respective queries. A lot of them have posted their email address where you can contact them in the chat. If not, the email that you will get from us by tomorrow or day after would have details about the application fee waiver, plus also a contact email address for the respective institutions. So you can write to them on those email address and get clarification for your personal query as well. My only request is before writing an email to them, take the time to check their website, check the requirement, go through the FAQs, or go through the recording of the session, and then reach out to them. Think about someone like NYU or any of the other schools where they have thousands of applications and each applicant asking a very simple query. It can just overrun their system quite easily. So my request would be to do your research first, make sure that you've gone through the website and all other sources of information before you trouble them with additional questions or all of them over email. So with that, I want to wrap up this session. I know some of you have hard deadlines or hard stops over here, but any parting advice to the audience today? There's still 250 people in this room, so any parting words to them from your end?
I would say just make sure that your true voice comes through in your application. We want to learn more about you. We want to learn who you are, and we really respect authenticity. So to echo Leanna's point, if you are going to use ChatGPT, we're admitting you, not software. So that's my parting advice.
Mine would be to please apply by the priority deadline. I really urge you to do that if you have the time and ability. And also to just know your why. Know why you're applying to the program you're applying to the schools you're applying to. It's really going to come out, especially in your personal statement. And that's just going to make it easier for us to understand who we're admitting.
I would say you're doing the right thing. You're taking advantage of the resources available to you. You're trying to learn more about the process and continue to do so. Accept help from those who are offering it, and reach out to the universities. All of us are extremely willing to help guide you through the process and give you the information that you need to be successful.
Yeah, and I would echo everything that my colleagues said. Good job on you for attending this today. That's a great first step in this process. And if you have any questions, reach out to us.
Wonderful, great. So thank you to the four of you for doing this session. This has been extremely insightful. You can gauge the audience interest from the number of questions we got and the number of people who attended this session. So it has been extremely insightful. My apologies to those whose questions went unanswered. As I mentioned, you'll get an email from Seed Global Education within the next 48 hours with the application fee waiver process for each one of them, their contact email addresses if you haven't taken a note of those already. And as I mentioned, the Seed Scholarships Fund round 2 deadline is 15th of Jan, so you've become eligible for that as well. If you have any more questions, reach out to the schools or reach out to us at Seed. We'll try to answer as many of your questions as possible. We'll also pitch in wherever feasible. If not, reach out to the schools, and all of them are extremely helpful, extremely responsive. They will try to respond to your question to your queries as soon as possible as well. With that, with everyone's permission, I would wrap up this session. Thank you again to the four of you. Thank you to our wonderful audience for being so patient with us. We ran over time, but this has been extremely insightful session. I'm sure this is going to have thousands of views on YouTube over the next couple of weeks and months. So thank you again for doing this session to the four of you and to the audience as well. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.